Everybody has a story. You have one, and I wish I was with you right now individually just to tell you and to be reminded myself how precious your story is, how much it matters to God. One of the great lies in our world that cripples the human spirit is the notion that my life, my story, this day doesn't really matter. It matters immensely to God. And part of why we're tempted to think about that is that nobody gets the story they want. But there's a strange dynamic. Very often we find our purpose in life precisely in that part of the story that we don't want. I was talking with our friend Dr. Rick just about that this morning, and we were walking through parts of our stories that we really don't want. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but we both have that, and I was thinking how often in the Bible that's the case. There'll be a Moses who is a fugitive, has to go and talk to Pharaoh, doesn't want to do that, or Esther when her people are facing all that problem, or Joseph when he's in prison, or Daniel when he goes to the lion's den, or Israel, particularly when they go off into exile. They discover there a purpose, a unique calling on their lives. Another friend of the Fellowship of the Withered Hand, Diane, will sometimes talk about people in the Bible whose calling sucked, and that's most of them. And so I want you to think today about what's a part of your story that you wouldn't ask for, that you didn't want, the script that you would not have written. And does that have something to tell you about your purpose? And I want to talk about that today through an actual story. There's a book written a few years ago by Amar Tolles called A Gentleman in Moscow. And because it is a story, it can be quite useful. So it's not a book report. It's not even particularly a recommendation. I like the book. But I'm just doing this to open up for us. How do we look for a purpose in the story that we don't want? And I may actually go into this story for a couple of days. In short, this book is the story of Count Alexander Ilyich Rostov, who was tried by a Bolshevik tribunal in 1922, not long after the Communist Revolution, and they deemed him an unrepentant aristocrat and sentenced him to house arrest in the Hotel Metropole in the heart of Moscow, and he was there for over 30 years. And the book starts with a poem that was attributed to him, although it turns out he didn't actually write it, called Where Is Our Purpose Now? The first lines, how well I remember when it came as a visitor on foot and dwelt a while among us. Well, where is our purpose now? And I don't know if it's intentional by the author, but of course that's deeply reminiscent of John chapter 1, verse 14, where it talks about Jesus, the great Logos, the great purpose. And the Word became flesh and dwelt a while among us, and we beheld his glory. However, the central character here, the Count, appears to be quite an aimless person. He's charming, a very likable character. But in the interrogation by the Bolsheviks that launches the book, his inquisitor says, what I do find surprising about you is that the author of the poem in question could have become a man so obviously without purpose. And the Count says, I have lived under the impression that a man's purpose is known only to God. And his inquisitor says, indeed, how convenient that must have been for you. Because, of course, if you don't know what your purpose is, if only God does, then you are quite free to live as somebody who doesn't have one, and just to pursue convenience and comfort and so. And ironically, as the Count lives day after day, week after week, year after year, under house arrest in this very narrow space, his life begins to open up, and he develops friendships, and he begins to care about people and notice them. And in particular, eventually, after many years, there is a young girl named Sophia, whose mom and dad end up being taken away and imprisoned, and she is left under his care. And he's quite certain that he would be the most inadequate caregiver for a little child on earth, and he may be right, and yet, that becomes his calling. And day after day, year after year, as he watches her and learns to care for her and invest himself in her, he is actually given a purpose. At one point, after he's been watching her several years, they play this game where they both kind of race each other through the hotel, and in the course of it, she falls and fractures her skull, and he picks her up and carries her out of the front door of that hotel, risking his own life to save her. The book says that while she is under surgery, he prays for the first time in his life. And he realizes that for all the things that a parent must do, really, it's quite simple. A parent's job is to bring into adulthood safely that little child so that they can live a life of purpose. And maybe, please God, contentment. But purpose is the most important thing. The Count is someone who was raised with every possible convenience, and he thought that's what his life was about. But in prison and in the throes of self-sacrificing love, he learns what might be called the blessing of inconvenience. He's talking to a friend and he says, I'll tell you what is convenient, because they're talking about how a lot of people want to go to America because they have garage door openers and televisions with remote controls and lots of conveniences. I'll tell you what is convenient, he said. To sleep until noon and have someone bring your breakfast on a tray. To cancel an appointment at the very last minute. To keep a carriage waiting at the door of one party so that at a moment's notice it can whisk you away to another. To sidestep marriage in your youth and put off children altogether. These are the greatest of conveniences, Anushka, and at one time I had them all. But in the end, it has been the inconveniences that have mattered to me most. Because, of course, to love is to be inconvenienced. And no one knows that more than God, and that is why Jesus said that the Son of Man has come not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. He has come not to have a convenient life, but a life of being inconvenienced, because love is to be inconvenienced, and in whatever part of your story it is that you didn't want, it is most likely deeply inconvenient. Later on, Sophia, when she becomes a young woman, asked the Count one time, do you regret coming back to Russia? He'd been away from Russia when the Bolshevik Revolution took place, and he actually chose to come back and then had to go under trial and under house arrest. And so she asked him, do you regret that? Do you wish that you would have stayed away? Because your life would have been much less inconvenience, much less suffering. Here's what he says. Looking back, it seems to me that there are people who play an essential role at every turn. And I don't just mean the Napoleons who influenced the course of history. I mean men and women who routinely appear at the critical junctures in the progress of art or commerce or the evolution of ideas, as if life itself has summoned them once again to help fulfill its purpose. Well, since the day I was born, Sophia, there was only one time when life needed me to be in a particular place at a particular time, and that was when your mother brought you to the lobby of the Metropole, and Sophia was handed over to the Count. And I would not accept the czarship of all the Russias in exchange for being in this hotel at that hour. And when I read those words, part of what was so deeply moving is, as best I can understand it, it was for me at the moment in my life when things have looked the darkest. And of course, that moment involved a lot of my own failure and very deep inadequacy and confusion. It was at that moment that there was the clearest sense of, now there's a purpose, now there is a calling, now there are people who need me. Now it matters immensely what I choose and how I live. And so I thought I would invite you today to think about what's the part of your script, what's the part of your story that you wouldn't want to have written, and ask, is there purpose there? The story always involves a central character, a protagonist, and the object of their desire. And the irony with the Count was when his life was filled with wealth and conveniences and privilege and rank, there was nothing he really deeply wanted. That was part of his purposelessness. And then it was in prison with this small girl that he didn't ask to come into his life, that he didn't feel adequate for. Then all of a sudden there became this tremendous desire that was worthy of a life. How can I love her? How can I help her? How can I sacrifice for her? So today, what's that part of your story that you would not have written? How might you serve there? What might you offer? It does not have to be large, and usually it will not be. Paul says when he's writing to the church at Colossae, whatever you do, whatever your work is, work at it with all your heart as unto the Lord. So today, in each moment, whatever's going on, notice, observe, listen, care, watch, pray, thank. Work with all your heart. Do the small things that you do for other people. Ask this question today. How can I bring value to this moment and serve God right now? How can I bring value to life and serve God in this moment? That's what gives a story purpose. That's what makes a story noble. And your story, your life, your day matters more than you know.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any future teachings from John Ortberg here at Become New. My name's Tim, and I'm a part of the team here. This series is all about stories. Everybody has a story, and everybody's story matters. And we want to know about your story, whether it's a story of coming to faith or a story of spiritual growth. Whatever it is, we're here for you. You can email that to us at connect@becomenew.com, or you can text it to us. You can also sign up for daily reminders whenever we drop a new video via text by texting the word BECOME to the number 855-888-0444. You can also send us prayer requests there. There's a team of us that meet to pray each weekday for viewers just like yourself. If you'd like to receive the emails that go along with each video, be sure to check that out at becomenew.com/subscribe. More than a video to watch, this is really a community to belong to. And we're so glad that you're a part of it. We'll catch you next time.